late one night, when my eyes beheld an eerie sight. My monster from my pants began to rise, and suddenly, to my surprise,
it was his crank.
I had a monster crank.
His monster crank.
It was loved by all the skank.
He made a splat.
It shoots off in a flash.
His monster crank.
I have a monster crank. From my studio in the castle east to the master bedroom where I beat my meat. The ghouls all came from their humble abodes to get a jolt from my hairy bones.
It was his crank.
I have a monster crank.
His monster crank.
It's loved by all the skank.
He made a splat.
It shoots off in a flash.
His monster crank.
I have a monster crank. The zombies were drinking cum. The party had just begun. The guests included Wolfman, Dracula, and his cum. The scene was rocking, all were digging the sounds. Igor on chains backed by his pounding hounds. The coffin daggers were about to arrive with their vocal group, the Cocksucker Five.
It was his crank.
I had a monster crank.
His monster crank.
It was a graveyard smash.
He made a splat.
It shoots off in a flash.
His monster crank.
I have a monster crank. Out from his coffin Drac's voice did ring. Seems he was troubled by just one thing. He opened the lid and shook his fist and said, "Whatever happened to that bitch that sucks my dick?"
It was his crank.
It's now a monster crank.
His monster crank.
It was a graveyard smash.
He made a splat.
It shoots off in a flash.
His monster crank.
I have a monster crank. Now everything's cool, Drac's a part of the band, and my monster cock, it's the hit of the land. For you, the living, this mash was meant to. When you get to my door, bend over, bitch.
It was his crank.
Then you can play with my crank.
His monster crank.
It's loved by all the skanks.
He made a splat.
It shoots off in a flash.
His monster crank.
I have a monster crank.